One of my favorite saints, and he's a relatively popular saint for most people, is Saint Anthony of Padua. And he's popular because a lot of people pray to him to find lost things. You know, you lose your keys, you lose your glasses, and maybe you even start to lose your mind a little. And so you pray to Saint Anthony because everybody says, oh, you lost something? Say a prayer to Saint Anthony. The tradition of praying to Saint Anthony to find something that's lost is actually from his own life. Not that he lost something, but that he lost someone. He was appointed to teach the young men who joined the friars about the scriptures because he had such an excellent gift at preaching. And it was precisely his gift of preaching that resulted in his being given, for his own personal use, a handwritten copy of the four Gospels. Now, a handwritten copy of the four Gospels was an extraordinary treasure for anyone to have, and rarely was anyone given a copy of the four Gospels other than maybe a bishop. But St. Anthony, in receiving this gift, was receiving it not just for himself, but for his students as well. Well, one day, one of his students, who grew weary of trying to learn what he was being expected to learn, decided that he would cut out on his own and find a new way and a new life. But he knew that in his extreme poverty and his poor education, that he wouldn't find it an easy thing to do. So he got the notion that if he stole Father Anthony's copy of the four Gospels and traveled at least some distance, that maybe he could sell it to a book dealer in another town. Stealing St. Anthony's copy of the Gospels and taking off in the dark of the night, he went from one town to another, attempting to sell his copy of the Gospels. But each book dealer, the minute they saw him and saw his copy of the Gospels, knew that it had to be stolen and assumed that it was probably stolen from a cathedral, or at the very least, a significant church. And so none of them were willing to purchase it from him. In the meantime, it was reported to St. Anthony that his Gospels had been stolen. And St. Anthony was distressed, not because he lost his copy of the Gospels, but because one of his students had disappeared in the night. The general assumption in the household was, of course, that the seminarian had stolen Anthony's Gospels and taken off with them. And that was a reasonable assumption to make. St. Anthony, however, was not concerned about finding the lost book. He was concerned about finding the lost soul. And he set himself to prayer before the Blessed Sacrament, night and day. He prayed and prayed and prayed that the young man would come back. And finally, one day, the young man did come back. Unable to sell the copy of the Gospels and unable to begin a new life, he finally returned to Father Anthony and returned the book to him. And St. Anthony took the book from him and he put it aside on a table. And he looked at the young man and said, "And now, what about you?" And he said, "Well, I don't know. I guess I'll have to find a new way of life for myself." And he said, "No. What about you? You've returned the book to me, but have you returned yourself to me?" You are, after all, my student." And the young man was taken aback and overcome with tears of gratitude. He kissed the feet of Father Anthony and announced how deeply grateful he was. And Father Anthony said, "Well, maybe you won't be so grateful." And he said, "Why?" And he said, "Because I want you to be my secretary." And for the rest of their lives, the two of them were lifelong companions. And after St. Anthony's death, Blessed Luca, as he's now referred to by the Church, also was interred in the Basilica of St. Anthony in Padua. He holds the position as being the person who still lies buried closest to his master. He never left Anthony's side at any time during his life, and we are deeply grateful to Blessed Luca because it is precisely Blessed Luca who reports all the details of St. Anthony's life that we have. Lost car keys, lost glasses, and even when we start to lose our memory, we might turn to Anthony in prayer and ask for him to help us find these things. But of all the things that we lose in life, we lose our loved ones. And like St. Anthony, we should pray for them, that they find their way in life and that they find their way into the ultimate glory of God in heaven. May God bless you.